today and also the other sessions, are there topics or questions that you want to dig into? And that can span from the technical side through to some of the ethical aspects of AI. Some of those I may defer, but there are like things around biasing and how that works. It doesn't work. So, I don't know. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah. Some of the barriers that companies often don't use AI yet, what are some of the biggest barriers they're going to face when deciding to switch over?
So the question's what sort of barriers are you going to get when you go away with AI? There's a couple of different takes on that. So some companies are kind of are already on the road to AI and they're probably quite know it because they've got kind of quantitative analytics groups. They've got mathematicians in place that are using modeling, and they need computational modeling to kind of allow them to do analysis. Like actuaries are a prime example. They're trying to understand risk, essentially. So they're doing kind of early days. It's more machine learning. It's a static model. There are other people out there who are not using anything at all. It's kind of interesting to see companies that run their businesses off Excel, which works. People, use it, know it. It's easy, and the usability of it is pretty basic. I think that the barriers that we see with regards to getting into AI is it's multifaceted. So, extending on what we said earlier today, the whole movement of data, you can do a lot of AI on premise. You don't need to go to the cloud. You can go and spark up a Linux box and run TensorFlow, build a model, have that. You go into a lot of hospitals, the research scientists they're doing it because their models are actually quite lightweight. The data sets are very focused. Like the example I gave earlier about radiation oncologists, they have a set of images, they know the size of it, they just want to run it through a model. The data set is somewhat static. But when you start getting into kind of contextual analysis, and by that what I mean is you go and take market tick data and then go and take Twitter information, go and take user group chat, that sentiment that kind of could provide insight into market analytics. That requires computational power. That's a big data set, and that requires a lot of thinking. So getting that data across is quite difficult. Some of the barriers that we see specifically in that is there's regulatory issues like PII data moving it across into the cloud. One of the really ironic things that we find is a lot of organizations that are gated by PII regulation actually have a lot of stuff in the cloud already, like your email. If you're using Office 365, guess where that's running? It's in the cloud. If you're running, I was just chatting with Salesforce, the whole of Salesforce is essentially a cloud. Workday, which is your HR information, it's in the cloud. So there's kind of, it's an interesting space, and I think both financial services organizations and regulators are kind of coming together to understand that a little bit better. From what I'm seeing, PII, we'll be able to break through PII in Canada probably in the next year or so. So I think that will trigger significant change. So that's just part of the data side. So the other thing, and this is where it gets really interesting, is the human side. And I kind of bashed that a little bit when I was up on stage. There is a lot of people coming out of college, university, kind of sub 30, who understand data engineering and data science natively. In the way that, like, I come from an engineering background, from a programming standpoint, I know how to write code, but I don't know how to manipulate data. I didn't know how to manipulate data, and that was something I had to learn. Whereas there is a generation coming through now who are kind of inverse in that their ability to write code is lesser than their ability to wrangle data. So those people have seen some really cool stuff in the last little while. How you apply that into potentially a longer term organization, it gets difficult. If you're a startup, life is generally pretty good. You can start from scratch. It's a greenfield. You can get things up and running. But if you've got 20 years of data in a 100-year-old organization, that becomes problematic. Now, there are some really pragmatic leaders out there, and I think Canada has a fantastic opportunity. We're beginning to see this, not mentioned names, but there is some good stuff happening here in these legacy organizations, and I think you will begin to see some change. Oh, a bit closer. Yeah, thank you. So
I worked with your brother.
the people thing is an issue. One of the really good things about being in Canada is you have universities here, you have researchers, you have people who are leading the charge. It's actually, I was chatting to one of the people earlier. Canada has a fantastic, like once in a generational opportunity to kind of lead here, not just from a technology standpoint or research standpoint, but policy. Wouldn't it be great if other countries started copying Canadian policy around artificial intelligence? So there's work going on there as well. So they're kind of the two biggest things. Getting data to a place where you can process it en masse, and also working with people in your organization to bring in the right people and also enable and educate people who are already in your organization to look at these different computational mechanisms. Does that answer your question? Cool. Yeah.
Because we are presenting this whole data, right? And we want to reason, like, not necessarily transfer clients with a relationship with another financial institution. So we lend them funds, we want to monitor accounts that they keep somewhere else. But it should be some application or like IT solution to like host resources. So maybe like I don't know aware of this, but maybe I don't know.
Yeah. So I think so. Google is like Home Depot. We have a bunch of tools, like a fantastic array of tools that you can leverage. What we do build stuff as well for customers. Where we see the innovation and the creativity is these startups, like Nick, who was on the stage with me from Sensor. His ability, what they're doing there is some really interesting, really cool stuff. I haven't seen anything specific to what you're asking, but I think there's a great opportunity for people to kind of identify these issues. Sorry, that's I don't know what that is, but it's kind of off-putting. To identify this opportunity and kind of go after it. We, like at Google, we're enabling people to break things apart and build them differently and disrupt and change. And it could also be something inside of your organization. So there's been places where the core business and these auxiliary concepts have been funded and changed. So even though your core business may be something separate to what you described, you should empower and engage your IT folks, your application developers and people like that to potentially look at that. But you may also need to go outside of your organization and look for the...
No. Like, I just monitor like operating accounts and how to provide the really the cash flow and everything. So we don't have the data like rather than customer provide statements to us, like let's say once a month or quarterly, we can review the cash flow.
Yeah.
If there is any application that we can just have an access.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I don't know, like it's totally solvable or workable using machine learning or AI. I just don't know anything off the top of my head that actually doesn't do it. So one great source of information is some of the meetups that you see around town. So Toronto has, if you go to meetup.com, I think it is, there's a like AI and ML, a wealth of people that turn up to those things. We host them at Google every now and then. That could be a place to go to. The other thing is potentially, like some of the guys who are on stage, like Nick. Nick has a really good understanding of the landscape. He may be someone that you might just want to drop an email to and say, hey, look, have you seen something? I don't specifically have an answer to that. So it's essentially monitoring statement or statement monitoring and cash flow.
That's because I don't have accounts with us. We have accounts somewhere else. So because we don't transfer the primary relationship from another banks, for example, right? So and we want to monitor operating accounts, yeah.
Had a meetup. Alrighty. Any other questions?
How do you recommend the journey of a model-based lending and then making it machine-based. How does the lender progress in that journey?
It's a good question. So just so as I understand the context, so right now you have a series of manual processes that you're having to deal with, and you want to automate them?
No, so a lot of lenders, they have people who specialize in looking at data and they make it. And then, they move to model-based lending. And then from a model, they move to a machine learning-based model. It kind of includes all that. So it's a journey. How do you recommend somebody manage this journey?
Well, I think you got to look at it from the standpoint of some of these mechanisms aren't like they don't make the decisions unto themselves. They're kind of used as coaching and modeling mechanisms. But as you go through that process, like you have to start with a very basic model, and someone has to sit there, and look at what's actually coming out and figure out, what I was talking about, bias. Like, is this something that is actually looking at how we function right now versus that model? And you have to get it to a point where there is satisfaction of the confidence in this. In the same way with a human-based model, you're going to have systems that you're using right now. Like, there's a lot of Hadoop systems out there where you still have to monitor what's coming out the other end. I think the thing with AI is you can, once you get that confidence level, you can kind of pull back a little bit. But I think for the time being, there's still a need for brain. There's still a need for human interaction as part of that process. And you kind of, once you get confidence in that, you can then start looking further up the chain or downstream to look at what's going on. There's a really good example. There's a company here in Canada which monitors all of the UPS and FedEx trucks. They're bringing back all this IoT data. It's fantastic what they're bringing back in. And a lot of what they did historically was very static modeling. What they can do now with that data is they've built a kind of a confidence model using AI where they can actually predict that a battery in a truck is going to fail. And why that becomes interesting is FedEx used to just, as standard policy, go out and every, I think it's 8 or 12 months, replace every battery, even if it was working or not. So they can actually get much better insight. But to get to that, there was a whole bunch of human interaction to make sure that that was actually what it was reporting on and how that was working. There was a lot of human-based interaction. Now they're confident in that, they can then move further upstream to look at other problems. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. On the back there. You may need to speak up a bit.
What's a good baby step to get into the AI space for an organization that doesn't want to spend a lot of money and doesn't want to go into the cloud space?
That's a great question. And the reason why I say that is there's a lot of TensorFlow, the framework. You don't need to know what that is, but that's quite complicated and can run on premise. The ability to kind of abstract away the complexity is what's been built in the cloud. So if you look at things like AutoML, which is a Google product, you can go and take a data set from Kaggle or a data set that you have that's it's zipped up and upload it into AutoML. And it will actually use models that Google has created where you can apply kind of a thin veneer around that's specific to that particular model. You can actually have a working model where you can send a request to using like Python code or something like that up and running in probably about an hour, like an hour's worth of training. So it's super, super quick. And it's something to even have a look at, even though you're gated by this on-premise, off-premise thing. The on-premise thing it's tricky because you're gated both by getting the data out, but also the computational power that you have on-premise. You may have a single server, you may have 10 servers. If you want to do something really complicated, you then need to go into the cloud. And one of the benefits of the cloud is this elasticity of compute. Like we can spark up one core, we can spark up 150,000 cores. So we can reduce like a risk analysis that's run every night across a lot of financial institutions from 8 hours on premise down to a couple of hours, if not minutes in the cloud. I think I'm kind of wiggling around here a little bit, but I think if you have a look at what's available on cloud providers with regards to the right-hand side of the slide I showed around democratization, like auto ML, cloud ML, things like that. I think that would allow you to ideate, and you may actually be able to pick off a workload that can move to the cloud. Because there's going to be data sets inside of your organization that are potentially PII restricted. There's going to be other ones that are not. So not every data set can't go to the cloud. There are some that can be picked off and pushed through.
You mentioned doing on-site small data sets, but you understand some businesses have some data sets. So how do you check for bias and correlation versus causation?
Yeah.
The data set may totally be off because it is so small.
It could be, and that's
the cheese and death by angling yourself in the middle.
yeah. So the question is around how do you, if you've got a small data set, how do you kind of minimize bias? That's a bit of it's a tricky one because well, that's it. You can take small data sets and still build a very functional model. Jeff Hinton, he does a lot of his work on numbers, like what a number looks like and how you do vision recognition. And he uses like 18,000 images. It's actually not a large data set to kind of train these models and understand it. It's very, very focused. So those are things that you can run on-premise with not much computational power. I think where it gets interesting is when you start really scaling out the data, adding other contextual elements in, so you get better insight into what you're going after. It's something that we probably have to sit down and have a bit of a look at as to what that bias is. But you also got to remember what goes in generates what comes out. It's a bit of a black box in the model, like your brain. If you go and ask a doctor, how do you make a decision? They're like, I just know that I need to do such and such, and that's acquired through years and years of learning. You can't actually get inside their head and understand how those 6 layers of the neural cortex are actually functioning to build neural networks for them to make a decision. It's the same with you. It's kind of look at what's going in, and you may need to clean up, wrangle it a little bit more to kind of look at that bias and try and bring it back. I think you need to understand the bias in the first.
Usually it's credit bias. Yeah, that's usually the declining too much or in this segment.
Yeah. Like, are you sourcing your data set from? It's probably internal data, but is that data set from a very middle class community? I don't know the specifics of this, but if you're looking to kind of get into lending in say immigrant community, and you start applying data for middle class to that, it's never, everything's going to fail. But there is opportunity there. But then sourcing data for that becomes a little difficult. There are data brokers out there, like it's the big end of town, but like Thomson Reuters, Bloomberg's, they do have data sets that could potentially be leveraged, and there are other providers out there that you could go after. But it's one of the kind of conundrums of AI is if you don't have a kind of a good data set, it makes it difficult to build a model. The flip side of it is, how do you collect more data? Is there some way you can kind of bring in data? And one of the things that we look at Google is kind of what we call the exhaust, the data exhaust. So there's kind of core data, but then there's like, as an example, logging data. So for you guys going to your website, you may be able to kind of use tools out there, which some of them like we have, like Google Analytics 360, to kind of look at who's actually going to that site and maybe drill into that. So the fumes around the interaction could actually give you some better insight into who you can kind of provide a better model for. So it's one of the conundrums of AI. You need the broad data set to build the model.
I have a question that is probably more relevant for more regulated financial institutions, but one of the things that I've seen on AI is, as you're saying, it's a bit of a black box. So, for example, if you've got a regulator who's coming in on is selling sales policies, how how is Google addressing the issue of how do you prove what the black box is doing? Because maybe in your doctor example, maybe the doctor doesn't know, but maybe if you drill down and ask the doctor more questions, they'll spit it out.
Yeah. So that's a great question. There is a lot of questions being asked about how these things work. So what we're seeing is the regulators right now look at what's going into the model and what's going out to deduce what is happening inside of the model. There's a bunch of tools that are beginning to hit the market as well as be developed by folks like us that will give better insight into the model. You can't just reach into a model and kind of pull out how did you do that, because it is a neural network, and when you look at these really complicated nets, you could have like 10, 15,000 layers of neurons that are passing to each other. In the human head, we have 6. So it gets really quite complicated. But there are tool sets that are coming in, and if you go and again look at ai.google.com, I'm just blanking on the name of it right now, but you will begin to see some of these tools that will be able to give better analysis. Like I know IBM's got one for WhatsApp that can give you some insight into how that transaction played out.
So that is kind of
It has to. Yeah, I think it's multifaceted, but and it'll look at kind of the ecosystem as well around the flow of data through the model. But you will see in time like the ability to analyze how a transaction comes in, because the regulators are going to come back and say, like, you used to be able to go to you and say, why did you do that? Whereas now it's like, why did you do that? And there's a flashing light in front of you. How does that play out? So I think and this again, it goes back to, there was a massive breakthrough in 2012. Things have moved fantastically quickly, and some of these things are kind of playing a bit of catch up to what's going on. Like the research community, a lot of them, like again, I was up at this machine learning conference up on Young and Dundas yesterday, and they just go into the mathematics that are at play and how they can explain things are great, but for a regulator, they're like, I don't want that. I want something that's explainable. So I think like right now it is an immature space, and that's also limiting the application of some of these models in a regulated industry for specific areas. But there are other areas where, how it comes out, like looking at things like and some of the capital markets stuff, how they can get ahead to their competitors. There is regulation and regulatory bodies there. There are other areas where it's not as, like there are levels of regulation. But there are tools that are beginning to evolve and come out. Any other questions? Yes.
What is the best ways that you would measure success using AI?
Best place that I've met success with AI, I have to go back to the call center side of things. So Google actually puts out, there's a call center solution that enables customers to essentially plug in and create a chatbot. So a lot of those, when you go to websites now and someone pops up saying, what do you want? What are you after? A lot of that is completely automated. And you think, you're getting to the point with some of them. I was on one, I bought a bike the other day and someone popped up and was asking me questions and I'm answering them. I asked one question and they're like, I'll transfer you to a human. I was like, I thought I was talking to a human, but I wasn't. So I think those places, those things, and it goes to what I said before, I think automating the banal is where we're getting success right now. There is also goodness happening in healthcare. Like as an example, both looking at the process through healthcare.
So awards are at 2:45.
Yeah. So there's two things in healthcare that are really interesting around image recognition. So taking what a radiologist does and actually using automation there. So the DeepMind team in Montreal and London, which is part of Google, can take an ophthalmic image, retina image, and actually figure out better than an ophthalmologist and a radiologist whether you have there's issues with your heart. There's that. The other side of it is some of the more complex healthcare situations like radiation oncology. Right now, they could probably put one patient through a day because there's a lot of pre-work and post-work that needs to happen by the radiation oncologist. A lot of that can be automated because it's really just process-based and checking. it'll be automated with oversight, but instead of it taking 3 hours, it can take 10 minutes. So there's that. Other things are around things that are really broad scale, that are very very simple, like retail analytics, looking at the logistics of, I don't know, say Loblaws or Sobeys, things like that can be picked off and gone after relatively easy. I think in all of your organizations, you'd be able to find something that you'd be able to go after. I think you probably, if you're in a regulated industry, look for something that's kind of customer focused, that doesn't involve the transfer of money. Like if people want to come in and get advice on a loan, and all of the information is actually on your website anyway, you could automate that using AI and using some of the tools that we have, that Microsoft has, that Amazon has. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Cool.
Are there technologies available to kind of from a facial recognition or voice recognition to see genuinity or somebody trying to fake a question?
So the question is, could someone be faking a question? And this is actually a wonderful yet scary part of AI. So you can do sentiment analysis. So you can actually go to google.com/ I can't even remember the link. I'll be able to dig it out. And you can upload a photograph of your family, like a Christmas photograph of your family, and it'll be able to identify that there's 5 people in there. 4 of them are happy, and the teenager is not. He's like, why am I in this photograph? I don't want to be here, and they're frowning. It can actually figure that out. It can actually map like left eyebrow, right eyebrow, smiling, things like that. So there's that side of it from a visual standpoint. From an audio standpoint, this also goes back to call center. We can pick up that someone's getting annoyed. So you call up and say, look, this item of clothing doesn't fit me, or the loan you provided me. Loans are probably a little bit binary. It's hard to kind of find, but I'm sure you guys probably have some examples, so be creative. The interaction goes from being, or could actually start off very intense. It's like, I'm not happy. It can actually pick up from the intonation of the voice, this is not good. So what drives people crazy is if you're angry and you're speaking to a robot, it makes them even angrier. So how do you kind of trigger out of that and get them to a human who can kind of understand what the issue is and actually move it to a place where you can kind of get resolution or rectification?
So it's going to interrupt the AI more too much. And to say that we just need to wrap things up on that side. So, and last question, and then I'll come back in and guide the next one.
Thanks, man.
One of those things was like, banks while dealing with SMBs, because they have a challenge, they don't have data, the probability of managing that stuff. When we run we have a lending platform, and in which we use a combination of data. And the last stage would be, we put them through a conversation with the person, and then can that help us right?
So you could pick up sentiment there. You could. There are. If you search for this, I don't know whether it's DeepMind or Element AI. I can't remember who it was. I might be getting that wrong. Don't quote me on that. But they have the ability to kind of extend that sentiment. Now, whether casting dispersions as to whether someone's telling a lie or telling the truth, that kind of still requires a little bit of work and understanding. But I think we'll be able to get to a point where it'll get a little bit clearer. And this is where it gets scary, because all of a sudden, someone's going to create a lie detector test to do that. So it's useful for you, but could also be used in different ways by other people. So we have to be a little bit careful. So listen, I know we have to wrap up. I'll be loitering around for a little bit, so if you do have other questions, please don't hesitate to come and grab me. Even if you just want to swing by, I've got some business cards. If you want to grab it and connect up later on, please do. I'm also on LinkedIn, just under Frank Currie at Google. I think I'm the only one there. So if you want to connect up that way and drop me a message, please feel free. Hopefully this was of use to you, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.